I'm Kira GAs. Can somebody just let me know if you can hear me? I think you might have been muted, Nick. Were you just responding to me?
Can you hear me? Ground control, Major Tom. Whether you're hearing me now. Rachel, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Thank you. Members and officers to this extraordinary meeting of the Nelson City Council to consider Council's position with respect to the Local Government New Zealand conference in Christchurch, Wednesday to Friday this week. I'm going to start with a karakia from myself. Tuia Kuronga, Tuia Kuroro, Tuia Kuaho, Tuia Kuroto, Tuia Hi Tangata, Karonga Te Po, Karonga Te Ao, Humie Huie, Taia Kie. Now, can I just check that we have Councillors Sanson, Brand and Hodgson on Zoom? So can just each of those just confirm that they're able to hear us okay?
Confirming I'm here, but Councillor Brand doesn't seem to be online yet.
I'm here and I can hear you guys well.
Lovely. Thank you. Good as gold. Hey, thanks for that notice. I have had no formal apologies, but I am going to accept the apology for lateness from Campbell Rollo, just for it to be noted. The sole item on the agenda is my Mayor's report. I authored it before we went into a further state of emergency on Thursday, and I did think it would be worthwhile, given the fact that our city is with Tasman in a state of emergency, simply within the context of my Mayor's report, to allow the Deputy Chief Executive and myself to make a few comments on that event. It's not my intention to take a large amount of time, but just because of its significance, to allow elected members to be brought fully up to date. Can I say, as the Mayor, that I have been hugely proud of the way in which the joint operation between Nelson and Tasman has dealt with what is another extraordinary event. Unlike August 22, the bulk of this has fallen on Tasman, but I don't underestimate the disruption to our city from the closure of State Highway 6 on Rocks Road. The advice most recently from NZTA is that the geotechnical issues with Rocks Road is such that it will be remaining closed to at least Wednesday, and that may have some impact on the decision that rests with myself and the Mayor of Tasman around the current state of emergency, that we'll be considering further advice from officers this week. Myself and Mayor King have established a mayoral relief fund and would publicly want to encourage contributions to that for those like Alec that have been close to the scene. The extent of the damage for hundreds of our rural cousins is pretty traumatic, and a mayoral relief fund is a way in which we can provide support. I have been super impressed, would be the word I would use, by the response of our community. The contractors that have worked in atrocious conditions over the last 36 hours, Alex, in getting from 13,000 people with their power out, the number of road closures, the number of water systems that are under pressure, is the extent of work that's gone on over the last 48 hours. And while the rain has been the worst, actually, sometimes you see the community circumstances at its best. And the number of families that have opened up for both friends and others to be able to stay when they've lost their accommodation. So my intention is that's just a few opening comments from myself. Hand over to you, Alec, with any information to share from your end. And then I'm happy to take any questions from elected members. And can I, in introducing you, Alec, acknowledge you have been the controller for the best part of the civil defence emergency. We note that you've had far too much experience, but anybody that's been involved in that emergency is very proud as the Deputy Chief Executive of this organisation that has been leading the charge in terms of managing this region's response to the event. So can I acknowledge that work, but also invite you to make a few comments for the Council.
Thank you, through the Mayor. Look, I am just one person in a massive wheel that operates very, very effectively, and I need to acknowledge the EOC and the very, very well run EOC by Joe Kennedy and his staff. One of the things I can say is that, yes, the roles have been reversed this time. In August 2022, it was Nelson that was particularly hard hit, but this time it was Tasman. And my thoughts do go out to Tasman currently in terms of the response as well as the long recovery ahead. That said, I've offered up our services in terms of our learnings from August 2022 in terms of the recovery, and we will help them in whichever way we can. Obviously, the last 3 weeks is in addition to the heavy rainfall that we had in April and May, and then we had these events in June. Having said that, first of all, we learned a lot. And one of the things we did manage to do this time round is make sure that we had all the necessary resources in the areas that we required them. And FENS, police, NEMA, central government have been nothing short of amazing. We had the New Zealand Defence Force with Unimogs staff. We had helicopters at our disposal. We had our navigators, which we were a little bit slow in getting off and up and running in August 22, but we had them running on day one. We had the NZ RT2 teams, both from our local and Christchurch. And we also had the FENS Rapid River Response Teams, and we knew following the potential areas that would be hit, we had those folk on the ground. So look, that was a fantastic learning. In terms of the damage to TDC, look, those rivers, in terms of the volumes of water that they received and the intensities, have carved new paths for them, and the effects will be long felt, not only in terms of that, but also in terms of their stock banks and the overall recovery. But the damage is significant. You only have to see Met on the TV trying to put together what that means for his community, but it is significant. The rainfall that we received, I understand from TDC, has set numerous records, and that's not records that you actually want to have, but they, in terms of the recurrence intervals, were very, very significant. And in the fullness of time, when they do those analysis, you will actually come to see, I guess, the full extent of that. What I can say is I'm extremely thankful that both TDC and NCC did not get the full brunt of this event, but certainly within a spate of about 2 hours, things went from very comfortable on a Friday to very, very dire indeed, in terms of everything happening. Our comms went down, our power went down, our potable water went down. It was as though every 10 seconds somebody was coming in through the door and raising another issue. But as per normal, everybody remained calm. The situations were assessed and the necessary action undertaken. I think one of the key learnings from us is that our lifeline services are key. I'm certainly not saying anything here that I haven't said in terms of my the public communications. But the first thing is when you're in the EOC, you need good intel. And when you have comms down and power down, you lack that good intel, because good intel allows you to make good decisions. What people don't realize is that for good comms, unless you're using Starlink, you need power. And when the power goes down, you need to make sure that you've got generators, you need to make sure you've got diesel, and you need to make sure you've got all of those in place before you get cut off. So there was there's a lot of work behind the background, but I certainly think that from the first event, and we've had 2 events, we had a bit of a break when I talk about the June-July event. There were breakdowns in resilience, there were breakdowns in communications, breakdown in the 111 system. But having said that, the crews from the telcos, as well as every single contractor that I know had their hand at the coalface, and the work that they did was nothing short of remarkable. But comms is absolutely critical, and it's a bit of a warning for us in terms of making sure that we have those resilient systems in place, and that we're able to have Plan B, Plan C, and Plan D in place. Because when the rainfall hits, or God forbid any other event, it shows you how vulnerable we actually are. As of today, all the state highways are open except Rocks Road, and we are waiting on NZTA to advise on the ETA on terms of the possible fixes. And certainly we are considering now, we are still in a state of emergency, but as we move over through to recovery, we will need to figure out when, how, and when we do that. But those decisions will be made closer to the end of the week. Lastly, there was a loss of life, and my condolences to the family. That is not something that on your shift you want to hear about. And that's very sad for any community. But one thing I have realized is that the rural communities are extremely, extremely resilient. Places like Tapawera, not only do they know each other by name, and they just get on, and they know how to do things. And we can all take a page from that book in terms of that resilience in the urban areas. So I think I'll leave it at that. I think that gives an overview. But I can say that lastly, in a short period of time, we were faced with every conceivable scenario: power, communications, water, multiple roads, slips, trees, the damage from the helicopter in terms of the trees, and is astounding. But that said, we've got blue skies, and now we can fight back, and we will offer whatever we need to TDC to assist.
Thanks, Alex. Just a couple of sharp questions from me. The first is, I was surprised over the weekend to learn how much tree fell there was across the region, particularly in the Spooners and the Tapawera area. The council itself in Nelson owns about 600 hectares of forestry. Have we got any windblown damage from Friday night in the Nelson City Council forests?
I think we have, but the extent of that I have yet to ascertain.
Okay. Second one was, obviously from the 22 event, our council spent very substantive money, and I think we're well advanced on 12 of the 18 slips and major roadworks out at Cable Bay and in the Maitai. Do you have any reports on how well those engineering works have stood up with these latest 2 events over the last fortnight?
Through the chair, I can advise that all the works that have been undertaken in terms of the process that this council followed in terms of identifying the remedial works have held up, which is very positive from myself in terms of.
And last question for me, and only an estimate: what sort of number of Nelson City Council staff over the last fortnight have been helping our rural cousins through the joint civil defence operation. Would you give an estimate of the number, either from yourself or the Chief Executive, of the extent of that support?
So for me, it becomes all of a bit of a blur. Actually, when you're in the EOC for long periods of time, you see faces that you think you know that you don't know. You see faces again, but I would say that we had to have surge staff. So we got a lot of staff from Wellington, Otago, Christchurch. But I would say on a rotational basis, from NCC, 60, 70, maybe rotating. And that's just at a guess. I see, I see a lot of people and they rotate. So I would imagine around about there. Yes.
And do you or the Chief Executive, just because this event's been awful and that we just went out of emergency status Monday and are back in again, are there any concerns about the resilience of our team and impacts on them of having had effectively 2 and a bit weeks continuously in state of emergency mode? And it might be for the
I think
for the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I will answer that. Look, I'm extremely proud of my team and the way they've volunteered. We don't force people to go and work in the EOC. It's volunteers that stand up, and a lot of people are. And so you're about right, Alec. And it's about 70 people that have volunteered. And I went out yesterday and asked for more volunteers to keep the EOC running, and it was a really good response from our team to do that. But it's not just those in the EOC, it's actually those people that were here in town on Friday and responding to various things across the board, thinking about the homeless, thinking about everything, thinking about, so across the whole of the council operations, I'd say actually almost everybody in the whole organisation has been involved in these weather events, and I'm really proud and pleased, and the resilience that's shown by the whole organisation is outstanding.
Thank you. Any questions from colleagues of Alec, the Chief Executive, or include myself in that technically this is the Mayor's report? Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. Officer Levertis, thank you seems totally inadequate at the moment, but I'm still going to say it because I know a lot of people want to say that. Thank you for the tremendous work and the leadership you've shown and your team. I want to go to something that you spoke of following the 2022 severe weather event. I asked you the question, was there any learnings? And I know people sometimes don't like that word, but I'm going to use that too. Learnings from that event. And you said, yes, there was one particular one that stood out, and that was we should have activated, or we should have engaged the navigators earlier. Did I hear you say you engaged them this time as well?
Through the chair, yes, we engaged them from day one. So as soon as I knew we were going to, we drew on all the people that had served as navigators. So they were on from day one. Yes, that was a key learning. We were slow in August 2022. Yes.
And they're still engaged? Still involved?
Oh, they'll still be engaged for the foreseeable future until such time as things settle down, however long that takes. But there will always be people hurting in the community that will just need that guidance from one individual, and the individuals that we have are really on top of it. They know what to do. They're empathetic, and they're great. Absolutely awesome.
I think the navigators, Councillor Courtney, from our August 22 event were employed for a period of about 18 months. And basically they were there to help people navigate the mix of insurance and EQC and different providers, and worked very well. Any other questions of Alec related to the state of emergency? Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. What everyone else said. It's a lot of people in the community want to support and help. I'm just wondering, and you don't want people going in there, getting in the way. I'm just wondering if there's going to be any information or who does that as far as people wanting to pop over with a shovel and a wheelbarrow.
So I think one of the things we can say is that if you really want to assist at this moment in time, you should be assisting in terms of dollars to the Mayoral Relief Fund. That would really help. We have a lot of crews on the ground, especially from central government. There's a lot of backup, Rural Support Trust, and a range of other agencies. I think we just need to let them do their work, and then we'll see where we go to from that, because it can become disruptive when people do try to help. And it's notwithstanding, look, in August 2022, when we had people on shovels, it was great. But I think we just need to we need to treat this in a logical way. And the best thing at the moment is finances, and let the other things work their way through. And then once the recovery manager understands where he is in terms of this, and we can look at reaching out. And we realize there's many people that want to assist, but we just need to focus on one day at a time.
Any other questions from colleagues with respect to the state of emergency and the response? That being the case, I'm sure I speak on behalf of the entire council in thanking you, Alec, Nigel, you and your team for the way of which we have responded. The key priority for the city, of course, is the NZTA, and I know, Alec, you're working very closely with them on that Rauch Road question and with the buses as we try and manage that aspect that impacts particularly on Nelson. The main item in my Mayor's report is with respect to the Local Government New Zealand AGM to be held on Wednesday. Myself, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Pakipaki and Councillor Skinner will be representing the council at that conference. There are 4 particular issues that are there for voting, and it was raised with me by councillor as to what was the process. I've tried to adopt a very similar process to what we have in previous years, and would like to facilitate a discussion about where we might take each of the issues. My way of managing the debate today, in my view, would be best to deal with the 4 different issues separately that we have. I'm making an assumption that there is no need to debate the remit that we have sponsored as the Nelson City Council with respect to the issue of the integrated bus services. So it'll be the other 4 issues. That then brings me to the first issue, which is the rates capping paper. I have had a discussion with the President of Local Government New Zealand and a significant number of mayors from the round of the country that are quite concerned about it, and trying to work through a solution of which will work for most. I am concerned about the number of councils that have resigned from LGNZ because every one of them that pulls out means that the levy burden on the remaining members gets more difficult. Auckland, Christchurch, Westland, the West Coast Regional Council, the Western Bay of Plenty, and then last week the Waikato Regional Council has pulled out. So certainly in my view, in Mayor and the discussions I've had with the President of LGNZ, is that we need to manage this issue in such a way that it does not erode what I think is actually quite important, and that is there is a national representative organisation with as broad a membership as possible across LGNZ. More than happy to take questions. If I was to express a view, my view with respect to rates capping is the devil's in the detail that we don't have. That is, the government has indicated through its working group that has previous local government people like Lawrence Yule and Malcolm Alexander on it, that is intending to announce the detail in the 4th quarter of this year of its rates capping policy. To me, it's a bit like income tax caps. Do I think government should be able to tax whatever you earn and go up to 90% of people's earnings? Of course not. And so if a rates cap, an income tax cap was set at 90%, I would actually be quite relaxed about it. But if it was set at 10%, I don't think the government would have the resources to be able to deliver the public services we expect from government. Exactly the same, in my view, applies with a rates cap. It's the devil's in the detail of it that is really important. One of the key things the government has signalled is that they are going to, in the rates cap proposal, differentiate between what is core expenditure and what is non-core expenditure. And every one of us, I think, around the table would say that is a really difficult boundary, and we would need to understand the detail from it. The one part that I don't think is tenable is for LGNZ to be spending ratepayers' money on a public campaign to oppose rates capping. I think it's perfectly proper that they lobby I think it's perfectly proper that they are engaged in the detail of the policy as practical people, but I don't think it is tenable for ratepayers' money and for the membership fees that Nelson City Council pays to the organisation. I just simply give that as a start of a 10 as to my own position. What I'd like to do is to give a pretty free-flowing discussion of either comments or questions from colleagues, and then having heard a number of those, see if we can facilitate a position that the delegation going to Christchurch is able to fairly represent the Nelson City Council view. Now, Councillor Benge has had his hand up first, and then I'll go from Councillor Benge to Councillor Rainey. And subject to councillors being quite comfortable, I would like this to be a pretty informal discussion, hear where different councillors go, albeit at the end, it will be my intention to allow a debate on what any position we might finally take. So the floor is yours, Councillor Benge, with either questions or comments. And I'm going to go Benge, Rainey, then Councillor Sanson. Councillor Benge.
It's not really about this issue. I want to go back a step to what you brought up about the councils leaving LGNZ. And I remember Mayor Brown saying, you know, we're big enough, we don't need anybody else, bugger the rest of you. It's a lot of money. But why are the recent ones leaving? Have any of them given reasons? Have any of them, the recent ones, have any of them given reasons? Because there's some smaller ones going now. What have they given reasons that for leaving?
I don't want to speak for them, Councillor Benge, as to why they have left. Councils like Christchurch and Auckland, it was a tone of value for money for their membership fee. Some councils like Westland, I think, felt that LGNZ was unrepresentative of a view for a small council. But I'm hesitant as the Mayor of Nelson to speak for other councils and the reasons that they have left, except to say that every time one of them leave, if you're in the tent, inevitably the cost to our ratepayers of being part of the organisation grows.
I understand the ramifications of leaving, and it puts the costs up and it weakens their argument. But I think the reason they're leaving is actually quite important for us to know. And I don't know how we get that. If we don't get it from the media, how do we get it?
Well, you could look at each of the articles. The most recent article in the Waikato Times last Wednesday reported on why the Waikato Regional Council was leaving. The resolution was passed, as I recall, 7-6. And you could read those media reports on what they have said as to those reasons, Councillor Benge.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rainey?
Thanks, Mayor. I mean, I guess regardless of whether a council remains in LGNZ or not, the issues facing local government are the same, you know, regardless. And I kind of, it's interesting, your comments about whether or not LGNZ should be mounting a public campaign when it's quite clear that other groups in the community are mounting public campaigns on the issue of capping of rates, of which I'm sure every member sitting around this table is extremely aware. Mayor Nick, in your discussions or in your conversations with other councils or with the councils that have pulled out, or the mayors of councils that have pulled out, did you pick up on from any of them their council position on this issue of the capping of rates, or on the particular issue?
I've spoken to a number of mayors since the Local Government New Zealand agenda was published, who are very opposed to the direction in the paper of LGNZ running a publicly funded campaign. And so the conversation I've had with mayors in other parts of the country are not from those that have left LGNZ, but from a number who expressed concern about the paper and indicated they might if this paper is adopted at its AGM. That is why I don't want to disclose who those mayors are. It's for them to advise their communities. But as a consequence, I did make contact with both the president and vice president of LGNZ, indicating concern and seeing if there was some middle route that we could find that would keep everybody in the tent. Councillor Rainey, where I think there is a difference, and you're absolutely right, there are organisations like the Taxpayers Union that's running a campaign in favour of rates capping. I think there's a big difference, though, to an organisation like the Taxpayers Union, of which people voluntarily give their money, and an organisation like council that acquires its money from a compulsory rate. And I think a greater discipline, and that's why I think if any person of this community wishes to donate money to a campaign organised by anybody on any issue, that is absolutely their free right. I think it's a different bent when you are taking money that you compulsorily, by legislation, take off people and then spend it on a public campaign.
So I don't necessarily disagree with you. My concern is that in approaching this issue of rates cap, the alternative viewpoints rely on context of what, in terms of people understanding the fuller context. In fact, if anything, those who call out for rates capping or for getting councils to stick to their knitting or whatever the rhetoric might be, it actually flows against, if you stick to that line, it can end up costing communities in the long term. Absolutely, as is quite clear when we see the rollout in so many communities around this country where infrastructure has been let to slip because people have called out for rates to be staying low. Now, my recent trip around Northland, where I did call in from Dargaville when it was hosing down with rain, unbelievable rain, Northland, I could not believe the number of houses with boarded up windows. It must have been from a cyclone from a few years ago. It was just profound. The infrastructure that was down, the number of slips on roads, we would have passed on a trip up the east coast and back down the west coast of Northland, we would have passed at least 30 or 40 road crews fixing slips. It's just profound. It's really profound. So the context of what this is all about, I think, is tremendously important. My concern is that if there is no coordinated campaign from LGNZ, would we as a council, would we as elected members want to be trying to put up some kind of rationale as to explain and give context to the community as to why we need to have a measured and careful consideration to this issue of rates capping? Otherwise, it's going to be a tremendously one-sided discussion. Not necessarily saying that I disagree with it, but I think it's tremendously important that we get the context right. And so I'd be interested to know what you think the alternatives might be, if you think there is actually an alternative to LGNZ's suggestion of a public campaign.
Sure. So the first thing of which I agree with you, Councillor Rainey, is that we need to be very cautious of underspending on infrastructure that then leaves an awful mess for future generations. And I think the Wellington Council is a very good example of that. And the second thing, when you're in a state of emergency, is we need to be very mindful that sometimes there are events of which none of us have control that dump very significant costs on a council that you've got a duty to fix. And I'm actually very proud of the way that this council collectively has responded to the August 22 event, albeit that has imposed a significant cost on our community. You rightly asked the question, well, no one can deny that there is substantive public concern about the cost of living and about rate increases. In my discussions with LGNZ and to ministers, my view is a more effective tool than rates capping is actually collaborating with central government on those things that are driving up costs. I have to say to the infrastructure manager that I've been quite shocked by the huge increase in the costs of this council's infrastructure work as a consequence of government regulations on air traffic safety measures, the cone disease that we all know. And actually getting rates under control is about getting into the detail of those things that are driving up costs. I've got to say, Councillor Rainey, I welcome the measure to get rid of the requirement to register hairdressers, because I think the costs exceeded it, and that has resulted in a small saving in the sense that 50% of the costs fell on the ratepayer and 50% of the costs. I think the more constructive way for central and local government to get rate increases down is to get into that level of detail in a very open, trusting process about what are those things that are driving our costs, and then working with central government on the reforms that will get those down. This is a little bit controversial, but I'd also say to you, Councillor Rainey, that I see very significant costs in this organisation as a consequence of having two councils in our region. And that is one of the reasons I favour a merger of the two councils, is I see substantive efficiency gains that will help take the pressure off rates. That's a view of which we all have a different view. But if you ask me honestly about what I think we can do to try and better manage rates, they would be things. Councillor Rainey, that complete your questions?
Look, I did have a little bit more to say, and I may as well say it now and get it out of the road.
Yep.
If that's all right with
Yeah.
is that all right, Councillor Courtney?
I was saying under my breath, go for it.
Oh, thank you. This kind of conversation with central government I think has to happen, as you say, in a constructive way.
Yeah.
Now, it's very difficult when, as an elected member, you sit here around this table and you have a sector of the communities going, but also you have central government going, oh, we're considering doing away with regional, the regional councils.
Yeah.
On one hand, even just suggesting that it sort of tends to suggest that that's not a conversation which is being held in an environment of collegiality. And then I just want to quote and read a little bit from an article that Neil Holden put out a week or two ago, if I may. On one hand, you've got criticism from the government about councils sticking to knitting and coming up with mechanisms by which they think they're going to keep councils sticking to knitting by a rates cap. Yet, on the other hand, we have a government that takes GST on rates for a start. It's just a complete anomaly as far as I'm concerned. They don't pay rates on any of the Crown land or the Crown buildings that we have in our community, and yet they enjoy that benefit. And on the other hand, happy to criticise local government. Just in regards to housing, as Neil Holden pointed out, on an average new build of $1 million, say, $130,000 in GST on that new build goes out of Nelson to Wellington. Around the same amount of money goes out of Nelson as far as PAYE and income tax is concerned on all the builders and the tradies and the developers who develop that property. That's close to $300,000 of that $1 million build goes to Wellington.
Look, I don't.
Central government, I mean, I need to get this off my chest because I think it's an attack on us as elected members. And I'm finding it difficult to work my way through this because on average, central government takes 9 times more tax out of the average Kiwi household, 9 times more tax than local government. And yet they've got the hide to tell us that we're doing it wrong. Well, I just think it's unbelievable. And I'm concerned, Nick, that you are suggesting that there may be some other way of bringing this kind of anomaly in terms of the rates cap discussion to the general public if there isn't some kind of campaign of general education or a campaign to inform the people at large. So I'm really interested to hear what other people say because I'm quite fired up about this.
The GST question on rates is a long beaten drum. And on housing, the only thing I would draw to your attention, Pete, is if you look at different GST regimes around the world, those that don't have it on housing have it on mortgages and on rents. And so they take just as much money in other regimes. The principle of the GST was it was on all services, including local government services. But that's a separate argument. I'm going to take Councillor Sanson and then other contributions as we try and find through where people are comfortable. Following Councillor Sanson, I'll take Councillor Courtney. The floor is yours, Rachel.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I think I am concerned that this whole rates capping proposal from central government is just a distraction. When we, local government is long known for being poorly funded and to have very few funding mechanisms. Rates is our primary funding mechanism. So I think just to kind of, concur with what Councillor Rainey has said, I mean, in some ways, this seems to me to be a red herring discussion. I'm also concerned that kind of highlighting the cost of things like registering hairdressers or road cones is a distraction as well, when we know that, like, we've incurred 50 million plus from the August 22 weather event. Tasman District Council, who knows, maybe they're going to be facing $100 million worth of damage. Because of climate change, extreme weather events are going to be increasing with intensity and with frequency. And for central government to be kind of taking away from us the only mechanism we have for funding this kind of thing seems incredibly short-sighted. And then I think on the amalgamation thing, Nick, whether people support amalgamation or not, I think we just have to be really careful about stating that it will be a cost savings, because when we had the presentation from Janine Dowding, the former CE of Tasman District Council, who'd done the research into it, and that question was directly put to her, she couldn't assure us that it would mean a cost savings, and if so, certainly unlikely for a decade or more. So I think we just have to be really careful about kind of holding on to amalgamation as this the golden apple that's going to save costs for the region. I also think that because there's such a strong kind of, it seems, ideologically driven lobby to bring in rates capping, I am concerned that if we don't, present a evidence-based, informed, alternative perspective, that it's just going to sail through the current central government reforms without any meaningful opposition. So I think we just have to, I would much rather see that this is just a part of a bigger conversation around how local government is funded. And I also think, it seems to me to be an overreach. Like, surely we should be, as elected members, as local government, I guess us unitary regional council and our community, be able to decide on what the priorities are for our community. That's it for me.
Hey, thanks, Councillor Sanson, and do concur with your comments about the storm events and the costs. And if rates capping was to prevent us from being able to do the right thing and fix up, is a very fair point. On the merger question, I did preface my comments with saying, from what I see as mayor, there would be significant savings, but also note that the lowest rate increases over the last 3 years has been from Auckland. And I think that is partly as a consequence of the long-term benefits of Auckland having a single council. But there are a range of views on that, and they're perfectly entitled to have. I wasn't trying to assert that as a council position, just a practical position from the mayor of what I see about where there are real opportunities for savings. I'm going to go to Councillor Courtney and then Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Nick. I'm very pleased you're having this council meeting, this extraordinary one, for the sake of our delegates that are going to Christchurch, because it's an unenviable task where they're facing, trying to manoeuvre their way through this particular remit. Because I heard you say, and I think I heard it correctly, the devil's in the detail, and so much detail is not there. And that is a real worry. You cannot make decisions if you haven't got the details on the major points. And they are, what is going to be indicate to us by central government as a core activity. What is it going to be? And what is the size of the cap going to be? You see, we've got an incredibly important task here, managing, taking care of ratepayers' hard-earned money. And we can't go into this half-cocked. We can't. So that's why I feel it's an unenviable job we've given our delegates to go to Christchurch and try and weave their way through this one. I was heartened at this stage to hear you say, Mayor Nick, about, I think you indicated that you were opposed to LGNZ running a public campaign at the expense of ratepayers, by the way, yes, I think you said that, for a cap. The timing of this is off by them. It's not the first time they've been off with their timing. Three Waters, they were off incredibly with their timing. They took government money at the time to actually promote the Three Waters thing without even consulting with the 80-something councils throughout New Zealand. So, and here it is again. They've got no political nous, I would go so far as to say. And that's sad too, because they're representing local government and they should be sharp and astute to these things, for goodness sake. Pete, I agreed with a lot of what you said about, rates and GST on rates, and here they are. It's just, I'm aghast, really. So I don't support rates funding being used to launch a public campaign opposing the rates capping. I don't support them spending that money because it happens to be ratepayers' money. I do not support that. So I hope I understood you clearly, Nick, and I am troubled by this because, as you said rightly, the devil's in the detail, and you cannot make financial decisions. You haven't got all the facts and all the details. So goodness gracious me, how are we going to instruct or advise our delegates to go to Christchurch and speak confidently on behalf of this council? We've only got we haven't got the details. So I'll just leave my thoughts there at the moment as we weave our way through this.
Thanks, Councillor Courtney. I don't think that was by way of question. I'll take Councillor Skinner, then Councillor Stallard. Councillor Skinner.
Cool. Cheers. So I'll save much of it for debate. This is more of get a bit of direction. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we need to come to a position as to what the delegates going to Christchurch will represent. And so I just want to keep it reasonably informal. And then after I've heard guidance from councillors, then potentially to see whether we could rest and find a common position.
So if we get an opportunity to debate, but I'm just listening to where the feedback
I will make sure there is the opportunity to debate, but if you wanted to express a view, Councillor Skinner, that would be helpful.
I always try to give the chair a bit of direction where I'm coming from, so she'll know how to steer the meeting. But I'm pleased LGNZ, before they charge on with this, that they're asking the council representatives or councils to support or not support what they're intending. I've lost a lot of faith in LGNZ, and in regards to your previous discussion, I'm a strong view that we shouldn't be subscribing to an LGNZ. And in the past, my first two terms, I found them a great advocate and source of trainings and information. But as of last term, in regards to Three Waters and many other things, they just charged ahead against the will of councils, against the will of the public, and weren't advocating for the needs of local government. So give credit, at least they've got the sense to come to us. But I want to clarify in regards to this debt cap, and I think the government are right to put this on the table as what they're intending, because that was the support they got from the voting population, the greater population. But it makes it clear here, unless they've changed the detail, that this is, and Councillor Courtney touched on this, the rates cap is on non-core expenditure by councils. So in regards to a bit of a fear-mongering there, that we won't be able to afford our waters or our supply or our roading, footpaths, etc., core stuff, no, that's still very much in our decision and our community's decision if we increase rates to cover core. But this is in regards to non-core rates cap. So unless things have changed, this is very strong feedback from the central government saying, hey, we've heard the people, we've heard the councils, the amount of rates increases on non-core needs to draw a line. And is that what I understand in reading this? I can understand a little bit discussion there about what do you call core and non-core, but I don't think we should be too tripped up on that. But have you heard any feedback, the CEO or Mayor, in regards to the core versus non-core? I know they're looking at different models overseas, but sometimes that can be a bit of a distraction. But have I got that right? That this is looking at caps on non-core. So if we have a sudden issue with flooding or sudden issue, we find some infrastructure needs some greater borrowing or expenditure, which is going to hit our community, government aren't interfering with that.
So in answer to your question, all I've got is the government's public statements.
Yep.
The Minister of Local Government has said that he is working on a proposal for rates capping with an advisory group, that it is intended to separate between core and non-core expenditure, and that he will be in a position to engage with the sector in the fourth quarter of this year.
Yep.
So that's about as much as I have in the announcements from Government Councillor Skinner.
Yep. So in regards to you sort of giving a bit of informality here to sort of give a sense of where we're at, and obviously as we hear each other, our views might be more refined, but I support the central government's decision to look at seriously our non-core rate expenditure, because it's come very clear from the public and the community and even personally that we just can't maintain these rates increases. There's obviously things that we've had to bite the bullet on, but as seemed to be, this table was offended by my feedback is that we don't have the balls to make some of these tough decisions. We've had our staff quite rightly bring us some options to consider for where we've had to make cuts, where we've expenditure been greater than we were intending, and they've worked very hard, and all they wanted some direction from us where we make those cuts. And when I've said, hey, they've been courageous, but we don't seem to have the balls for that. And this is what the government's stepping in, saying, hey, if your councils haven't got the balls to make the tough calls to keep within your budgets, we will have to set some guidelines on that. We as a council have also set our own rates caps. I see here some murmuring there. I hear our council, the terms have set some voluntary guidelines on debt caps and rate increase in caps, but we haven't had the courage or the strength to keep to those when it's got to the too hard basket. Oh, we're going to ignore those. We've ignored those caps. So I think this is where the government has said, hey, we really need to put some pressure on you to acknowledge and keep to not just your own voluntary one, but we'll put some on. So, and I see with the LGNZ, that's sort of, I think, being a little bit disingenuous, making out this will have effects on us being able to fund out. I hear these murmurings again. At least it's not a point of order from last time from a workshop when they don't agree, when people don't agree with what I'm saying, and you don't have to agree. But when it talks about we endanger our ability to look after our core infrastructure, no, this is nothing about our core infrastructure. And public are usually pretty good about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner. The floor is to Councillor Stallard, and following that, I'll be going to Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Nick. It's clear to me from reading the paper for the meeting that the proposal that we're voting on is for LGNZ to continue on their current direction of travel, which is around advocacy. And then there'll be a next phase when they'll consider explicit actions that might include a public campaign, and that will be decided by a special general meeting at a later date. So I do wonder if around this table we all have a shared understanding of what we're voting on today, because some people might think we're voting on whether to give the go-ahead to some kind of public campaign. That's not my understanding, but I wonder if there is two or more different sets of understanding of what we're voting on today.
The specific motion that's been tabled for the AGM is that the AGM approves the direction of travel set out in this paper. Now, that's quite somewhat difficult because direction of travel does not say every piece of detail, and so it is open to interpretation. Reading of it, it speaks very positively of the campaign that was run by the Local Government Association in South Australia, and in my view infers that LGNZ would run a strong public campaign. But it is vague about the level of specificity about that, and that's the best answer I can give you, Councillor Stallard.
Yeah, I mean, it would be unfortunate if we go into this and vote with people having different understandings about what we're voting for. And I think we're there now. We have different understandings. And to me, it's clear when it says the next phase will go to a special general meeting, be held after the elections. So we have a mandate. And it's clear that mandate would be needed to proceed with a strong public campaign. So to me, the wording is clear. We're not voting on that today. It'll come later. I think unless we get some clarity and some uniform sort of sense of what we're voting on for today, our vote might not have much meaning.
And that's why, Councillor Stallard, I was quite keen to have an informal discussion rather than just have a straight vote support for or against or abstain. And my desire at the end of it would be to try and provide some guidance for the delegation going to Christchurch, and we'll see if we can get to something that is clear on that. The piece I agree with you, Councillor Stallard, is just a simple position as to whether we're going to vote for or not that resolution. It needs to be a bit more nuanced than that. I'm also aware that there are amendments that are being proposed to the resolution at the AGM, and that's why it's useful to have this discussion, so that when myself, Councillor Pakipaki, the Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Skinner are in Christchurch, and we see those amendments, we've got some feel of where the majority of the council is and how you would wish us to vote.
Question for clarity,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. Councillor Stallard, what you're saying at the moment is that if we vote that we won't support now the local government this direction of travel, is that could be implied that that would lock us into a different direction of travel, I guess, or rather lock us out of other options later on. Can you just expand on what you were talking about, where the
Sure. So my basic understanding is that we're having a vote, or at the AGM next week, there'll be a vote on continuing the current direction of travel, which is to talk to ministers and so on in opposition to rates capping. And that there might be a later vote where there might be a proposal for a public campaign. That's my understanding.
So if could it be taken from that if we lock in our position now to this, misunderstanding what the process is, that it could potentially exclude us from one of the other options later on?
Well, my concern is that we have a shared understanding that today, what we're basically deciding on is, do we support a rates cap or not? We're not deciding today whether we support a public campaign or not.
So I'm guessing, so what I'm probably being led to there is that it's really important and very clear that it's explicit today that this conversation really only revolves around, do we support the rates cap or not, in terms of this component of what we're discussing today. Mr. Chair, can you help?
Not really, in the sense that if you take my position, and I think it's been reflected in a number of comments from colleagues, is that the devil's in the detail. For the Nelson City Council to have a simple position as to whether we're opposed or supportive of rates capping, I don't think is certainly not where I'm at, and I'm not saying that's where the majority of people are at. Just in hearing different comments around the table, the hard part is when you've got a long paper that talks about a strong public campaign, and then it seeks a motion to say that we support that direction of travel. Is the Nelson City Council in favour of a public campaign or not? And what I will do to help you, Councillor Pakipaki, is after I've heard for a few more comments from colleagues, then suggest a way forward about how we can communicate our position. So it's a good question.
I think it's important.
But I just want to hear the different perspectives before we try and find how we give guidance to the delegation going to Christchurch.
Yeah, because we're looking at a binary decision here, and the opportunity to be able to have a second bite at the cake, I guess, later on. I want to make sure that we're not locking ourselves, or rather excluding ourselves from that option later on.
I understand that position entirely, and I'd like to now give, unless Councillor Stella had a further point.
Yeah, there's two more quick questions. Do you have any idea what proportion of rates would be non-core versus core?
No. Unless you start to define those, because the hard part is, and I was Minister of Local Government and got into the debate of this, it is absolutely clear that a big chunk of our expenditure, and I would be happy to take guidance either from Nikki, Alec or Nigel, but I would estimate, if I look at our long-term plan, about 3/4 of our expenditure is on infrastructure. Now, to what degree you would define that infrastructure as being core? Is the Trafalgar Centre core infrastructure or not? Is the Saxon Field complex, is that infrastructure or not? And so I actually find the Chief Executive's pre-election report would actually give some good breakdown of how council spends money, both in terms of capital and operational expenditure, is quite helpful to answering that question. But we don't have it as definitively as that.
Okay, finally, the proposal for rates capping is about decisions of, rating and spending sort of local money.
Excuse me just for a moment. I'm going to ask the Deputy Mayor to just take over the meeting. I've just got a call from the PM coming in. Wish to speak to him.
I'm in charge. Your question, Alan?
I'll finish now. I'm too scared. The proposal is that these decisions that are currently made locally will be made centrally. And in our consultation for the long-term plan, the first question was around rates. And we described our position as some kind of middle position where, sure, we acknowledge it's a higher rates increase than normal, but we have made cuts to minimise that. So do people agree with this, what we call a middle position? Or would people rather have more services provided and a higher rates increase? Or would they rather have fewer services and a lower rates increase? Now, a clear majority of people supported the middle position. The next most favoured was more services and a higher rates increase. And the least popular of the three was fewer services and lower rates increase. So we do have those kind of conversations with the community. I wonder what is the benefit of saying the community can no longer decide that and someone in Wellington does, where we currently have that steer via the long-term plan consultation.
I think that would be a very good point for you to bring up once we move into debate. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we're possibly jumping the gun with some of this conversation as well. I think Mel was right when he talked about LGNZ potentially being ahead of themselves too. I think they're just a bit out of scope. So my position would be, and I can save most of this for debate, is that we shouldn't be supporting their current direction of travel. It is really crystal clear to me, if you read the document that they put out, they talk about developing a comprehensive advocacy plan, needing to be louder publicly, and they talk about a strong and vocal opposition. And that just makes me uncomfortable as a direction of travel. But I can talk about that more later. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I was next in the speaking list.
Really? I didn't see your name on the list. Yeah.
Not on the list. I'll have my goes. Most of the second floor would have heard some of my thoughts with a passionate discussion between myself and the chief executive last week. But yeah, just my initial steer would be look, what we've got in front of us, I struggle to say it'd be the wrong time. The government is actively looking at this. Is it better to try advocate for change after something's already happened? Generally, no. This is not a new issue. It's been put forward in 2004, 2006, 2009. It's floated around, even indeed a Crown spending cap that the government quietly discharged in 2012. Just a few questions in my mind is, especially if we're going down the route of saying, well, no ratepayer money should be spent on anything related to this. Advocacy is a core tenet of LGNZ. Their primary income source is council membership fees, which we don't apportion a percentage, but if we just took the same percentage of our income that is rates versus non-rates, naturally, that is ratepayer money going to the organisation to pay for their core staff. If a campaign is just involving their in-house media team and advocacy team, calling up people and saying, hey, this is a bad idea for XYZ, I think that's the purpose of the organisation, and I'd struggle to say that we should prohibit them from doing that, provided that the direction we give is that we want to oppose rates caps. I'll save that for now. I guess just another thought would be one of the challenges is what it's already become clear is what is core council business. And I don't think that balls have ever had much to do with the funding and budgeting decisions we've made around this table. I think it's as much to do with failing to get agreement
on what are services that are worth cutting, because this community is very diverse. The services that they use, some parts of our community value very much, others don't. And what we ourselves view as core and critical spending at a certain time differs a lot around this table, whether it be, should we be investing in a Te Hunanui surf life saving club, or an artificial turf, or an arts hub, or all of these things that would generally be painted as non-core services, but to many in our community are fundamentally core to their enjoyment of the city, which is local government, is our driving purpose. That's just an initial taster from me. Is that Kahu?
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Acting Chair. I've got a little bit of mixed directions on this here as well. I think it's been sort of unveiled earlier on. I think it's also pretty ignorant for us to suggest that an organisation like LGNZ shouldn't be spending ratepayers' money on advocacy when that is exactly what that organisation is set up for. It is an advocacy group. It is a union. And to be a part of that advocacy group requires us to obviously contribute to it. And if they're advocating on our behalf, that's precisely what they are supposed to do. Whether they're advocating for the right things or not, that we actually support what they're doing, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. That's more important. The caps themselves, now I see these and there's probably a question. When, at this point, where is the devil, I guess, the detail in the non-core expenditure? It just seems like a political football that's just being used because of the proportionate amount of money that local councils actually have, by the government doing what do they call it, a more of a disqualifying councils for making decisions for their own. What tools have they provided so far for us to get a gauge on what exactly that non-core looks like?
Right now, we really only have
what's in the document.
What's in the document, the public statements from the government. It hasn't been defined. I would suggest that probably the clearest picture would be to go back and look at the Local Government Act when the 4 well-beings were first removed, and they were replaced with a list of a prescribed list of sort of core services that then were replaced again with the well-beings, and now we're expecting that to change again. In terms of the functional scope of council, those changes to the Act have meant very little operation.
So what does the roadmap for this look like in terms of them implementing? We've got
right now the roadmap for LGNZ, or the roadmap for the government?
For the government, yeah.
All we know is that they are working at pace on a proposal, I think was the wording most recently used.
Okay.
Councillor Anderson.
A couple of questions first. So this has been tried in a few places and hasn't worked. Is that correct? Has it worked anywhere?
It's I would say that is a question of political judgment in terms of what working looks like. As chair, I won't give you a definitive answer. As a councillor.
Okay, so just in the report, and maybe anyway. So what we're trying to do now is create a thing that hasn't been created before, as far as what this rates cap's going to look like. We don't actually know. It might look like something.
Right now, we don't have the detail of any proposal.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm not in favour of a central government rates cap, so you can communicate that. A lot of it's, like everyone said, what's non-core, and just given, and some people might argue that LGN's too far left and that's why people are dropping out, and other people may argue that the central government's too far right. So I'm wondering how those guys are working together. But I'm concerned that non-core could be, waste minimisation, climate change, our sports facilities, our marina. And I wouldn't be surprised if non-core was something that would make me quite unhappy, given what's been going on and my values. As far as the advocacy, I'm comfortable. We've got and to be fair, it's good that Councillor Skinner's there. He's got a different view, and you guys can debate. But I don't not mind where you land. But I think hopefully you've got a bit of a feel on how we feel. I don't mind the advocacy thing going on if we had an idea what was going on. But as it stands, the only thing I feel like in direction I can give you is I'm not a fan of a rates cap where we don't know what it is and we're not involved in setting it.
Any other? I've inherited a strange format of direction prior to debate. Any other early direction?
Yeah, just that based on what people have said, we might want our official wording today to reflect several issues. The rates cap itself and then a public campaign. There might be separate kind of guidance on those two things.
Yeah, can I just add now that Mayor Nick is back in the room? Can you mentioned that you were going to sort of seek that direction from us? Can you? Oh, it's not going to work. Okay, I got to wait.
Sure. I apologise to colleagues. The Prime Minister just wanted an update as we were up to with the state of emergency, and the latest he just returned to the country from overseas. So I apologise for that.
Didn't want the latest on our rates capping debate.
I didn't get him down in the weeds on that. I just made plain that particularly our neighbours Tasman will need some help. Was not so provocative to take him there. We just need to have some guidance forward. I have had Councillor Courtney pass on to me a suggested way forward. And Councillor Courtney, did you wish to speak to that as a potential start of a 10?
Yes, in a vein of trying to be helpful and move this forward. I was late because I drafted this, so I thank you for accepting it at this late stage. And I want to move, if someone would second it, an amendment that the Nelson City Council does not support any rates funding being used for a public campaign opposing rates capping, and that the council reserves its position on government's policy until greater detail is known on the definition of what is or is not core services and the level of the proposed cap. That is my suggested way of not moving forward, but just giving some sort of indication to the delegates that are going to the LGNZ conference in just a short time. Because I don't find it's not an enviable task we're giving them. And I just thought it was a way of showing our middle ground, quite frankly. That's my contribution.
Councillor Hodgson, love the baby, so cute.
Everyone else is in movie world at the moment. I'm stuck here with this one. But I'm happy to second that if you need a seconder, Mel.
Okay, look, Mel, you're formally moving that as a resolution?
As an attempt to wrap things up. Yep.
Sure. Okay. Would it be possible for officers to put that resolution up? And it seems that Councillor Hodgson is prepared to second it. It certainly sort of reflects where I'm at, is that I'm hesitant of taking a fixed position on the rates cap policy when there is too much unknown. And so it ticks my box from that point of view. And as I indicated at the beginning of the meeting, I was not comfortable with any of our rates money being spent on a campaign. More than happy for LGNZ and for us to do the lobbying part. That is absolutely what we should do. But with respect to a public campaign, goes too far. So is there anybody else that's got an alternative resolution that they would wish to move? If not, what I'll do is I'll allow Councillor Courtney and Hodgson to move and second that resolution. Councillor Skinner.
Just a quick question, and that's very appetising. But to be clear, so that's when we go down there, and obviously the vote of us attending that would be a vote of what the majority view here is, regardless of our personal views. That would be a very clear no to LGNZ pursuing on their travel. But you're saying if we get an opportunity to speak to why and how and what, we can put those words in. But it's very much going to be a yes/no decision.
Correct. No,
and I want to make sure that we don't go there thinking it's a yes or a no when it's been ambiguous. I think it's clear, but you're to make sure I've got it clear. That's a no to the remit, but giving a bit of feedback if they come back to it following term, which I think is, there's some talk about that, following term, then it would be reconsidered depending on.
Correct. If this resolution was passed, then I would take the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Nelson City Council to express it as the council's position. It would also then influence, and I would do that in consultation with the Deputy Mayor and the other members of the delegation, yourself and Kahu Pakipaki, if any amendments were moved, then I would make any decision to either support or oppose those amendments relative to what this resolution was said.
Well, feedback that I support, feedback.
Any crisp questions? Otherwise, I'll move to debate. I've got a crisp question for everybody. Is there an alternative resolution? Councillor Rainey?
Well, by way of clarification, I understand where Councillor Courtney's coming from, but I think this is premature because, as Councillor Skinner has pointed out, this is something that could happen after the election, further down the track. What's in front of us from LGNZ is that the AGM approves the direction of travel set out in the paper. Now, I have no idea what the specifics are from central government about rates capping, what their definition of core or non-core activities are. It would be far better for us, I think, even though they have pointed out in this paper that one of the possibilities is a public campaign. I think it would be better for us to say continue the conversations with central government, see how it goes. If you want to come back with something that's more concrete, as they have pointed out, that should be after the election. So I would be happy, Mayor Nick, if you're seeking an alternative, to move resolution that supports exactly what LGNZ have asked us to do. That is, that the AGM, that we support that the AGM approves the direction of travel set out in this paper.
Okay, so I tell you how I'm going to handle this, and Councillor Benj, I'm happy to take a procedural question, otherwise I'll move to debate. That is, in the event that Councillor Courtney's motion is passed, that settles the position that we'll take. In the event that Councillor Courtney's position is lost, we will come back to the position that Councillor Rainey has outlined, and that is that the Nelson City Council approves the direction of travel set out in the paper, and that we would vote in that way. So what I'm now going to do is to move to debate mode. If there are no further questions, and I'm sorry, question, Councillor Stallard?
I mean, I don't know why the wording reserves its position. Does that mean to not support? Why can't we say does not support the motion?
Yeah, because what this position says is the Nelson City Council is opposed to rates funding being used for a public campaign. But the council is reserving its position on the issue of a rates cap until we see more detail. That's what I think it says. And that would be, we'll all have it, and people are all entitled, particularly when you're going into a local election campaign, for people to express individual views. But for the chief executive, that's the guidance that the council's position is.
But at the meeting, when they say vote now, are we going to vote support, not support, or abstain?
On the, I'm aware, and I don't want to go further than that, Councillor Stallard, that there are amendments being proposed. But in my view, if that resolution was passed, and I'm the presiding member issuing it, then we would vote against the resolution unamended as it stands. And that is, I interpret the paper that has been distributed for the AGM, that the direction of travel as to mean a publicly funded campaign. I genuinely feel that's the only fair way to interpret it. It mentions it twice, it's quite clear. And so if this resolution has passed and the amendment is put at the AGM, Nelson City Council would not be supporting it.
Just got a question of clarity.
Yep.
About, so if this here, we agreed to this amendment, and then at the meeting, as a proposition that was similar to Councillor Rainey's was presented, would we then go with that? Because because that'll be an amendment to, like you said.
Yep. My view is that the resolution in the paper we have from LGNZ is not 100% clear. Right. And it's about Nelson City Council saying, what's your position? And Councillor Courtney, seconded by Hodgson, has put up, well, this is what our position.
So my question was more about process. Yep. If the scenario should arise that we're in Christchurch and there is an amendment that comes to the floor that is similar to Pete's, how do we proceed with that? Is that just going to be your decision too?
The end of the day is the presiding member, which is the mayor, will make a decision about how we would vote on any amendment, because we can't debate amendments that we don't know if they're here. That I would do so in consultation with the other members of the delegation, and I would take into account the contributions that people have made today in giving me guidance. And at the end of the day, I'll be accountable if you feel that I have misinterpreted or misrepresented the council's position.
I'm happy with that.
Okay, so it's been moved. Councillor Benge, I am going to move to debate on the resolution, and I'm going to take Councillor Benge and then the Deputy Mayor.
So you're talking 3 questions after I indicated I wanted to point it out.
Well, my apologies.
I think this is premature. I agree with Councillor Stallards. If you read the thing word by word, they're not asking us to do what everyone's scared about. I don't think you could stand up in the court of law and argue that it doesn't say the bit about having a public campaign comes later and you get to vote on it again. And Councillor Stallard's point was very valid. What are we voting on?
We are voting on those 2 positions that is proposed in Councillor Courtney's, and that is...
I know, but when we go to, or when you go, you're not voting on them during a public campaign. That is a possibility at a later date. You are asking them if they will head in the present direction of travel. I haven't got... And the present direction of travel states quite clearly that the part that people are concerned about comes later. And we are possibly cutting the head off before it even gets anywhere. And they are our union. It's their job.
Sure. And I think this is... Councillor Benz, they are perfectly reasonable positions, but they are more in the form of comment, now appropriate for debate, of which you will get the opportunity for debate. All I wanted to do is to cut off any closing questions on the Mayor's report on this item of rates capping. The Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, sorry, just firstly, a very procedural question is Councillor Courtney and Councillor Hodgson have moved and seconded what's in red. Is the implication that they've moved and seconded the whole block?
No.
Structurally, how are we actually formatting the wider resolution?
So what's my intention is to take the motion from Councillor Courtney and Hodgson and put it and debate it. And when that is finished, we will then deal with the other 3 remits and then deal with resolution number 1. So what I'm wanting to do is to deal with what's our position on rates capping, get that sorted, then move what our position is on the other 3 issues, which are different, and allow some discussion on those, and then I'm going to put resolution 1 separately. So the resolution that's been moved is only that which is in red.
Could we please have it on the screen for those who are online?
And then just a further clarification around the direction being taken or interpreted in this resolution is, I understand the point about amendments, but the sort of the second half of this resolution in front of us is about that we reserve any position on rates capping. The current approach of LGNZ is opposition on a principled basis to rates capping.
Correct.
Am I correct in interpreting? We might support an amendment, but no matter what, even if it was an amendment to clarify the public campaign elements as highlighted in the first part of this resolution, we would still be opposing the overall paper because it does set out a position on rates capping.
Look, I could consider the two parts of 2 separately if it was wished. I'm hesitant to do that because that would be against the intent of the mover and seconder. But I think the Deputy Mayor's interpretation is correct, and that is, if this resolution is passed, it's saying, no, we don't want any ratepayer money spent on a campaign against it. And 2, we're not necessarily opposed. We're not necessarily in support, but we're not necessarily opposed either. We're going to wait until we get the detail from government before we had established the Nelson City Council position on rates capping.
But for the purpose of the discussion in front of us, it's essentially we're taking this as not support. Out of the support, not support or abstain, the overall paper is not support.
I think that's fair comment.
Not comment, genuine seeking clarification in terms of intention.
Yeah, and I think inevitably when you're dealing with something as vague, and I'm pleased that council officers' paper aren't so vague, is that when you're putting up a paper that says it supports the direction of travel, it's quite difficult to decipher well exactly what we are supporting and not. And that is where I do think Councillor Courtney's motion gives a greater degree of clarity about what it is, even though you might not agree with the position. So I'm now going to close off the questions. I'm going to ask Councillor Courtney, as the mover of the motion, to give his contribution and any other on the adoption of Resolution 2.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for accepting this. I was just seeking a way through what I thought was a very open-ended paper, quite frankly, that we couldn't lock ourselves in. We mustn't lock ourselves into any aspect of this. And right at the moment, the timing and everything is off, as I said before when I was speaking, by Local Government New Zealand, and contributions around the table have said, well, nothing's happening on one part of it until 2026, and then another says 2027 in the paper. And I thought, goodness gracious me, how are we going to weave our way through this? And I just felt so sorry. No, it's not sorry. I felt a need to assist and help the delegates going to Christchurch. And that's the sole purpose of it, because I thought we could be sitting here all day and into the night, quite frankly, with what we had here. No, Pete, no, Councillor Rainey said we wouldn't be. Okay, right. Well, I love that positivity too. That's really, really good. But I read it a couple of times over and I thought, oh, I don't know about this. This is just too vague, lacking in detail. And you can't commit your residents, your ratepayers, to some vague direction that is not spelled out yet. We don't know what central government is doing. And yes, we get into a political space and say they should keep their nose out of local government, but they have been elected by the community. They are our central government, so we have to sort of work in around that. And I just find it very uneasy. We don't know what the core, what is core and what's not core. That's the first one. So how on earth can you get and firm up an opinion, a position on that when you don't know that, and the level of the proposed cap? I mean, that's fundamental to the whole jolly thing. So no, I'm putting this forward as an effort to help those going to Christchurch to close off this discussion any further, because as others have pointed out, including Councillor Rainey, that some of these series of travel, as they're calling it, which is very confusing to the public, I might tell you, that terminology, very confusing. They don't understand what it means. And if we support the government's position or the LGNZ's position on the direction of travel, they won't have any idea what we're doing and what we're voting for. So I'm happy to move this in a fashion of trying to be constructive, trying to move the thing to just a reasonable middle ground to give our delegates some indication from around the table. But if the table doesn't support, well, that's I've tried.
Thanks, Councillor Courtney. I'm going to offer the second slot to Councillor Hodgson if he wishes it. Otherwise, I'll be going to Councillor in order of Benge, then Sanson, then Rainey, and then Skinner. Councillor Hodgson, did you wish to exercise your right as seconder?
Yes, I'll keep it pretty brief. And it's really just to say that for me, there's a clear distinction between offering insight and offering a collective voice, which I think is LGN's role, versus what seems to be bordering on activism. We don't currently have a proposal before us from the government. So I don't think they would be offering insight and expertise, but just making a bit of noise on ratepayer money, which is what they're already doing. They're already quite clear on their position. Their current direction of travel says that they would be preparing the detail for a public campaign, which I already think is getting a bit too far ahead of themselves. I think that a cap is probably not the answer to the challenges that local government is facing. And I don't think we should pretend that by supporting caps on rates, we're actually doing anything except shifting the burden onto future generations. We do know that the only way to keep rates below a cap is for us to actually cut expenditure. So I do just want to kind of clear the air and say I didn't see any person around the council table strongly advocating, myself included, for a substantial reduction of expenditure during the development of our LTP. So I just think we should wait. We should see what the government puts forward and allow LGNZ to then bring the voice of the local government sector in terms of just insights and expertise to that discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hodgson. The floor is Councillor Benge.
Thank you. I don't support a cap on rates, but and it's somewhat arrogant to put us in this position of having to make a decision, but it's nothing unusual for central or local governments to be arrogant in some of these positions. We should have the detail. How can we make an intelligent decision without the detail? But I'll state again, I agree with Councillor Stallard's argument that we aren't sure what we're voting on. I think it's quite clear what we're voting on. And it's not to spend money, ratepayers' money, on a public campaign. That's to come in the future and is to be voted on again. But of course they have to have a plan somewhere out in the future. And it is their job. They are the union for the councils. I can see people jumping up and down if they did nothing about it. And here we are jumping up and down at the possibility that they might do something about it in the future. Now, for LGNZ to deal with the government is a fairly slippery job. Therefore, they want things to be vague from us, possibly. And it's the same. For years, I've sat in committees where people are being sent to vote on remits. And people going to vote on these things always want the same thing. They want it to be vague so they can make decisions at the time. They don't like going with a yes or a no. No one likes going to the table with a yes or a no. And I think you should get a yes or a no. And I just think we're not clear on what we're voting on. And I'm sorry, Mel, but I don't think this helps.
Thank you.
So I don't support a rates cap, and I don't necessarily support what they may want to do in the future, but I think they've made it very clear that this is the first step, and you get another bite to say what they do in the future, and that's where this, I think, needs to come in rather than now, because now you're just saying no. and you leave them with nothing. If everyone says no, you leave them with nothing.
Thanks, Councillor Benge. I'm going to take this third slot before passing the speaking poll on. Firstly, I think this council needs to acknowledge that there's a very substantive issue in Nelson and New Zealand about the extent of rate increases and the cost pressures that are on families and on businesses. And that with inflation the way it has been over the last few years, the scale of increases are unsustainable, and that everybody who has elected roles need to be working to get those rates better under control. I'm actually proud of the work that this council has done, and note in the report that's been published today that our 6.5% increase for the year ahead is substantially below the average for most councils, and that is a good thing. But I also note that the current inflation rate is 2.5%, and so we too have work to do. The reason I support Councillor Courtney's resolution is it does two things very clearly. I do not think it is appropriate that we spend ratepayers' money on a campaign publicly to try and persuade them that rates capping is a bad thing. The government is responsible for the Local Government Rating Powers Act of 2022. It's entitled to make changes to it. But to me, we're into a very dangerous area where we are compulsorily taking money off our ratepayers and spending it in an advocacy role to be able to do more of it. I've got no difficulty with lobbying. That's the job of LGNZ. I've got no difficulty with detailed engagement with both LGNZ and with government. But it crosses a bridge too far to be spending ratepayers' money on such a campaign. And I support Councillor Courtney's resolution because it puts a line in the sand on that issue. I don't agree with those that say that the direction of travel of the paper doesn't indicate that. It says, and praises South Australia for running a strong public campaign. It says, and I quote, "This plan," that is LGN's plan, "would draw on South Australia's successful campaign," which in South Australia spent hundreds of thousands of dollars of ratepayers' money on such a campaign. In the last paragraph, it says, for LGNZ to proceed with a strong public campaign. The only interpretation I have that when it says that we're going to support that direction of travel is that the current direction of LGNZ is to spend ratepayers' money on a public campaign. And I think the Nelson City Council should say, no, we don't think that's appropriate, regardless of where this debate goes. And then secondly, on the issue of rates capping, it is my view that I think it's quite a blunt instrument, that I am worried that councils, the way in which we define core, we absolutely need to have the capacity to respond to the sort of storm events that we're experiencing right now, that we've got an intense duty to our communities to invest in the infrastructure. I'm encouraged that the Minister has indicated that he's going to differentiate core from non-core, but the devil's in the detail. I'm also of a view that it all depends on what the level of cap is. If you take the current Rating Powers Act, it almost allows council to set an infinitely high level of rates. And so my opposition to a cap or not is going to be highly dependent on where that cap is. And that is why I think Councillor Courtney appropriately says, on the issue of rates capping, this council reserves its position until we've got all that important detail. And depending on that detail, I may end up as a supporter or an opponent. So on those bases, I think it does provide the guidance that the Nelson City Council should give to LGNZ about its future engagement on this significant public policy proposal. The next speaker is Councillor Sanson on Zoom.
Thanks, Mayor Nick, through the chair. Yeah, I am concerned that this, that the amendment and much of the debate is kind of muddying the waters. And I do think that LGNZ is asking us whether or not we support their advocacy against rates capping. So it's kind of asking us, do we support rates capping or do we not support rates capping? And I don't support a central government mandated rates cap. I think it's really important that we in local government retain the ability to engage with our community and determine the rates cap that is appropriate for us. And I know we all pat ourselves on the back and say, weren't we so wonderful, and we only had like a 6.8 or something rates increase in the first year of the LTP. But remember, we fudged the look of that by putting on a $300 per housing unit storm recovery charge, and that if we had actually just bundled the cost of the storm recovery into our rates increase, I think it would have been about 13%. And don't hold me on the numbers, but I think that it's just one example of how we looked at every avenue we could to cut spending. We took rubbish bins out of reserves and parks. We decided not to replant beautification, planting beds in many of our parks around the city to bring down our rates take and bring down our spending. And yet, with the impact of the storm recovery costs, our rates increase for the first year of our LTP was around about 13%. So I think we are just, I personally think we're being a little bit naive by kind of conflating this issue as, taking this kind of indignant approach to LGNZ's advocacy. And I think that it's, I think we need to stay on course with LGNZ in terms of not supporting a central government mandated rates cap that takes the decision-making power out of the hands of our community and out of our councils. So I'm really sorry, but I don't support this recommendation or amendment.
Thanks, Councillor Sansom. Can I ask for the indulgence of Councillor Rainey? I've had a message from Trudy Brand that her battery is going to run out soon. Strictly speaking, you were strictly speaking, you are first, but if you were prepared to allow me as chair the discretion to allow Councillor Brand to speak, because she is on Zoom and because that battery is running flat.
I know what level the battery is on, that's all.
Are you in, Kerr? Look, thanks for your indulgence, Councillor Rainey. The floor is Councillor Brand's. Councillor Brand, are you able to hear us?
Can you hear me?
Well, yes, we can. Now, you owe Councillor Rainey a beer or something.
I'm not a beer drinker, so I'll have to give him some gummy bears
far
or
more
something.
classy, in that he's given a speaking spot to allow you to speak.
Okay. I just want to say that I find this all a bit too vague, and we really find it a bit odd that the direction of travel states that it will be for the council to address in 2026, and that's a new council. That's not the council sitting around the table today. So I actually thank Councillor Courtney for putting this amendment forward, because I was feeling a bit uncomfortable with where we're going with this. And I sort of also am a bit nervous that a decision will get made by Stealth, similar to what happened with LGNZ's stance for Three Waters. So I'm just a bit nervous that we will say, oh, it's not a decision today, it's a decision for later, but it will happen by Stealth, and then the new council around the table won't have the correct information, or will feel that a decision has already been made. So therefore, I think the core services were raised by the Minister at the Local Government New Zealand Conference in Wellington, and he was asked then what defines core services, and he said that was coming. And yet here we are with another local government conference coming up, and I heard the Mayor mention before that has formed a committee to define what core services are. So I sort of find that a little bit, well, how long are we supposed to wait? Because you've mentioned this over a year ago at the previous local government conference, and yet we're still waiting. So therefore, if the direction of travel is to continue advocacy and approaching ministers, then yeah, sure, that's okay. But has that really been successful? It's hard to measure because we constantly get change of governments that takes a change of approach in how they feel that local councils should operate. And therefore, what is a cost-effective solution, and how do we do this? Because we should be engaging with our community. I mean, they pushed about support local for local, and yet we do this through our long-term plan, as it was mentioned by another councillor before. So I do feel that central government are overreaching and maybe stay in the conversation about how and what options are available for council funding. But I will support this amendment as it's put forward, because we don't know what we don't know, and we're asking to make good governance decisions on a level of vagueness, which I don't feel really happy about. So yeah, that's where I stand. Thanks.
Thanks, Trudy. The floor is now Councillor Ramis.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. So, look, I thank Councillor Courtney for trying to move this along. However, I oppose it's a resolution. It's not an amendment. It's a resolution, isn't it? The reason being is that, as others have said, I don't think we have enough detail. Let's be very clear. LGNZ is a membership organisation. We are a member of that organisation. Every single thing they do on our behalf is ratepayer funded. That's how we are a member of LGNZ. We use ratepayer money to be a member of LGNZ. Now, I absolutely want LGNZ to engage with central government on this issue of rates caps. I don't have enough information in front of me, as Councillor Ben just said. The definition of what is core activity remains to be said. We've already got people standing for council in the upcoming election who are saying, stick to core activity. They oppose building a new library. Now, I don't want to get into a debate about that, but I certainly don't want the Minister of Local Government to tell me or our community what is core activity. Now, I don't know that at this point. The only way that I'm going to find that out, unless we engage as a council directly with central government, is to ask LGNZ on our behalf to lobby, to find out, to have the discussions, to have the collegial approach with central government on coming back to the table and bringing what can hopefully be a well-worked-out system for looking really closely at what's core and what's non-core activity. Because I think it's a very hard thing to define. This resolution doesn't give us the leeway to be able to support LGNZ in that pathway. I think it's too premature, and I agree with others who've said that this needs to happen after a concrete proposal from central government comes back to us.
Thanks, Councillor Rainey. The floor is Councillor Skinners.
Thank you for that. Actually, I think this amendment's very clever. What Councillor Courtney's put through is showing his years of experience, and I don't often praise you enough. Hey, no, I think it's a good solution, because I think we would be voting for or against this remit for different reasons. And I think this does give clarity, and it does give us that flexibility to make a smarter, wiser decision one way or the other upon understanding what's core, not core, or what the roadmap of LGNZ is. I personally do not support the direction of travel of LGNZ wanting to go down, and their President Sam Broden has made it very clear that he intends to fight against the government's back to basics stance. And I think it's been very clear from public that councils should be getting back to basics. I realise there'll be a differing of views around the table, and that's what democracy is. And the fact that we're a little bit worried about what will be and what isn't core, and I think some of us around the table are starting to lose sight of what is core. So I welcome either LGNZ or the government coming back to saying, hey, this is what we believe is core or not core. I also sense and understand around the table concerns about this might be overreaching if there's caps put on expenditure. Once again, I think this amendment's very good because it's saying no if it's a yes/no decision, which is what the remit is, but it gives us a flexibility if, as the Mayor's pointed out, is aware of some amendments possibly coming to the table at the conference, that this will give us a very clear direction what we can or can't support on those amendments. We're also walking into a bit of the unknown there. But I do find it ironic that LGNZ is wanting to spend public money campaigning on enabling councils to spend more public money. and that worries me, because being an advocate, but that's an advocacy using our money to work against some of our community view. And I share that view that we shouldn't be increasing rates on vanity or non-core projects. And I think, as I've repeated many a time, we keep creeping between what's core and what's not core, and that line of what we should be doing or shouldn't be doing seems to be very blurred. And I think this is trying to get us back on track. So for this, it gives me clear direction on what to vote for, but also I think this gives us a bit more direction and feedback of what the concerns are, and understandably those concerns are how much is those caps going to be, what areas those caps are going to be, and how much and what is that travel of campaigning of that LGNZ wants to do. And we might find that we get there and there's a certain aspect of it we want to support them campaigning on. But I think this has been extremely helpful. And keep in mind, these decisions won't really play out. And I think LGNZ have jumped the gun on a bit of a activist crusade. Next term, or our next term, I think we have a clear understanding of what groundwork or definition that they're really putting forward. And I think that discussion will be helpful at LGNZ, as whatever comes out of that, I think the government will get some feedback of what concerns are, or what not concerns are, which we are itemising here rather than just a yes, no. And that will help shape, if the government is coming back to some guidelines or rules or legislation, that will be shaped into that. So on that, I very strongly support what we've got here. And I do ask people to support that. And that just leaves the door open also, as much as I'm against this direction of travel in LGNZ, it does give us a bit of scope coming to next term to be more informed and make it probably a clearer signal. Then it hasn't closed the door completely. As much as I want to close that door, it still leaves that open. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Skinner. For people's information, the next speaker will be the Deputy Mayor, then Councillor Stallard, and then Councillor Anderson. The floor is Deputy Mayor's.
Thanks, Minik. I'm opposed this resolution, and I do so on for two key reasons. Starting with the second half, which is that we're reserving our opposition to rates capping on the basis of more information. I don't need more information to know that I oppose rates capping, because for me, this is principally a question of what is the purpose of local government. And to me, that is a reflection that local communities differ. What local communities view as core to their identity and to their needs differs. There are places around the country where people are satisfied with their local government purely providing roads and pipes, and that everything else is sufficient to be built amongst themselves. There are plenty of places where it is core in the community's value that things like the provision of sport and recreational facilities, like arts and cultural events, are core to what they value about the place that they live. The question here is, should they have the choice to be able to decide those things? Or should bureaucrats and politicians in Wellington choose what is best for those communities? Simply put, I'm always going to be on the side of localism here, is that actually communities know best what they want. And they make that decision time and time again. I think Councillor Stallard made a great point that we asked our community about this very thing. We said you can have a moderate rates increase and moderate service cuts. That was the most popular option. Or you can have a low rates increase and significant service cuts, that was the least popular option. And still, to get to that 6.5% or then plus the 300 charge per rateable unit involved false savings of 1 year cuts to maintenance budgets. We are fiddling with the balance sheet to try to deliver these outcomes. Do we need central government to step in and say, hang on, we're going to tell you exactly how much things are worth to your community? I simply don't think so. And I think it goes counter to what local government can and should be, which is communities getting to see themselves reflected in the place that they live. And if communities want to choose to invest more in what some may consider non-core elements, that's their prerogative. They can choose to do that, and they can elect people who will make those decisions on their behalf. And if they don't want that path, guess what? They can choose to elect politicians who will reflect that view instead. We have elections every 3 years for this reason. And I think we see often changes in direction as communities change. But the second part to me here is this sort of notion of a public campaign. And I think part of that is this question of, well, what is a public campaign? I think some people are picturing buying front page ads across major newspapers. Do I think that that would be an effective advocacy approach? No. But do I think saying that absolutely no ratepayer money should go towards public campaign from an advocacy organisation that we pay a membership fee to advocate on our behalf for, essentially says, well, none of your staff are allowed to do any work on this because your staff are paid from the ratepayer contribution or membership fee to this organisation. We say that you can't do a social media post. You can't create your own content and generate your own stories. You can't, with the president or vice president acting in their LGNZ role, go out and say these things because that's all funded by the membership fee that we pay to LGNZ. We essentially are saying, don't do your job. I mean, the final point on this that I'd make is one of timing, is this notion that it's the wrong time to do it. The government is actively considering it. We should be asking the question, why aren't we already in the room as they're drawing up these proposals that threaten the existential existence of local government? Why are we drawing comparisons? Yes, the impact of rates and the cost of that to communities is very real, but using CPI to understand our own cost inflation is wildly out of step with what we consistently see year on year in terms of infrastructure costs, with a 30+% increase in the cost of bridges. These are just complex conversations that aren't solved through simple mechanisms like chucking on a percentage. And we've seen that time and time again. This was tried in 2004, it was tried in 2006, it was tried in 2009. It failed, Even a crown spending cap was tried in 2011, 2012, and the government quietly got rid of that by discharging it out of select committee. To me, this is just a question fundamentally of, do we believe that communities can make decisions for themselves? And I fundamentally believe that they can.
Thanks, the Deputy Mayor. I've got Councillor Stallard and Councillor Anderson to speak, and we've got some other items. We've been going for 2 hours. I'm going to take a 5-minute break now, with us resuming at 3:03 for us then to take those last few contributions and then put the resolution to the vote. Council is adjourned to 3:03.
Can I just ask that we do a vote by division? Sorry, I can't hear you, but I'm just asking for a division on this vote. Thanks.
That's not to say yes. Because I was also trying to cope with some media interviews that continue to flow in as a consequence of local events. We are at the point of having a further contribution from Councillor Stallard, then Councillor Anderson before we put the resolution. A question came from Councillor Sanson of wanting a division. Can I assure you that will be the case? The floor is Councillor Stallard's.
Thanks, Mayor Nick. And again, thank you, Councillor Courtney, for this attempt to find our way through. I won't be supporting the amendment. I do believe the paper from LGNZ is sufficiently clear. They're wanting support for the current direction of travel, which is outlined in the paper around advocating for better local government funding or financing. Rates capping directly constrains local government funding and financing. It also runs counter to localism, and that locally elected representatives are better placed in Wellington to make local decisions. So I think the first part of the amendment to me amounts to some kind of unsolicited advice. There's also, to my mind, quite an inconsistency in logic in the amendment where there's two parts, one around rates funding being used for public campaign and the second around a rates cap. Now, both of those parts we know about an outline form only. We don't know the details. And yet the amendment takes the position that because we don't know the details for the second, we want to sit tight on this. But even though we don't know the details for the first, we're going to oppose it. So the fact there's not sort of a consistency in logic or principle there means I won't be supporting it. We did hear that from the mover that the government has been elected to make these decisions, e.g. a rates cap. I don't believe that's the case. That's not my opinion. I believe that amongst the government, local government and the community and so on, decisions should be made at the appropriate level. And if we're talking about community funds, rates, local projects, the appropriate level for those kind of decisions is with the community and their elected representatives, not the government, because we should be very clear that a rates cap will effectively be a kind of a veto on projects or priorities that the community has, the community wants to fund, and they find that the cap gets in the way and they cannot fund those priorities or projects. I think the origin of this talk about rates cap is interesting. We have had a period of 3 or 4 years of high inflation and high rates increases, and we did have a report commissioned from Infometrics on the cause of those high rates rises, and that was very clear that we saw over a period of just 3 years increases in costs related to infrastructure of close to 30%. So there's those upfront physical costs. It also means the book value of our infrastructure, because it costs more to replace it, increases, depreciation costs go up, insurance costs and so on. And the response to these increase in infrastructure costs is that while then we have to cut, what you spend elsewhere without looking at why are infrastructure costs so high, what are the factors there, are there other funding mechanisms and so on. So I think that the context is important, and this rush to impose a rates cap, I just think it's missing sight of the bigger picture of what's going on with local government and funding. And, in closing, I think there's been a lot of talk about the amount of rates and so on and what we'd like to see there. This issue before us is not about the amount of rates or the percentage increases and so on. It's about who makes the decision in regard to local communities, the money that's raised by rates and the projects that goes to. In my mind, it's very clear the community and their elected representatives should be making those decisions, not somebody in Wellington. So I won't be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Stallard. The floor is Councillor Anderson's.
Thank you, Mayor Nick. I'm not supporting it either. I'm very concerned about what non-core is, and I believe our GNZ should be advocating for us. I also don't think delegates are going to be, I don't think you're going to be dealing with this remit. There's going to be an amendment, so I would like my views. I just express my views again. So I'm not a fan of the rates cap. The non-core thing, and I believe in localism. And also, so I do think, we want to keep rates low and, maybe intestinal fortitude balls, we need to worry about. Sometimes I think where my cowardice lies is personal. I'm not speaking for everyone else. I'd like my life to be easy and my neighbours, and I want people picking on me, so I can agree to keep things lower cost, knowing that someone else is going to have to pay for it later, knowing that I'm setting my kids and my grandkids up. So, I get away with it now, but I'm thinking, geez, they're going to curse my name when I'm gone. But anyway, I know what you're trying to do, Mel. I appreciate it, but I don't believe in the rates cap, and I'm quite comfortable with LGN supporting it. And I don't have a feeling that this is what delegates are going to have to deal with when they pop up there. And those are my feelings, and I trust you guys as a collective to make the decision, and I'll back you up.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. I'm going to take Councillor Pakipaki, and then I'm going to provide the right of reply for the mover.
Kia ora mai tātou. This is I'll use the basic terms. I mean, this is a dog whistle, a way of the central government disqualifying local government from actually doing our job. By saying that this is the part of the divide and conquer, to make an accusation that local government doesn't know how to spend their own money, that communities who have elected us to be in the room, we might as well not even be here. What is the point? If we're just going to say, oh, the people in central government were elected to be there, make decisions, we will bow down and take what they give, you might as well quit your job as a councillor. Because the idea of local government is actually we're hands-on, feet on the ground in our community, making decisions for our community. Let's not be disqualified by the type of thing that this is. And I think Pete had it really down pat. It is a distraction. It isn't really where it's at, but what it does is it really devalues what councils are all about. So to be very clear, our amendment that we're talking about at the moment here, it's got two parts to it. I don't support rate caps, but I do support LGNZ. It's not going to cost us anything more for LGNZ to do what LGNZ, we are part of the membership and we pay our subscription to do. This is their job. This is what we signed up for. And to wave a flag and say, oh, we don't want them spending ratepayers' money. We spend ratepayers' money every day advocating for our communities where we are. So I'm definitely, I can't be in support. Apologise to Mal. We had a really good, robust discussion during the break about it. And I know he's trying to make this help and get forward, but I think that the first part of this here really closes the door to further conversations if we just simply say, oh, that we're not opposed to rate caps. We don't want to begin this discussion. I think LGNZ and the steps that they're taking, the advocacy that they're making, is the actual process in terms of engagement, because it will be engaging with the government. And hopefully when that conversation takes place, we will be able to start to pull the threads together to have something that really fits for our community. Nō reira.
Thanks, Councillor Pakipaki. I'll give the right of reply to the Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mayor Nick, and to everybody that's participated. I have appreciated it and listened to each and every one of you. I cannot believe I can't impress upon you more how important this decision we're making today at this time is. I've got to say that, and I speak from experience here a little, because you're going right off the subject. A lot of the contributions are talking about the government this and the government that, and digressing away from the point of the amendment or the motion as it now is. And the motion, yes, I think it is. The motion is the Nelson City Council does not does not support any rates funding being used for a public campaign opposing rates capping. Strongly opposed to that. That's the Nelson City Council's position in this amendment. So those that are voting against this will be for ratepayers' money being spent on this activity of a strong public campaign against rates capping. They want no capping on rates at this time, putting aside the situation we're in here in Nelson and throughout Aotearoa, New Zealand. We have a cost of living crisis of the like we have not seen for decades, and I mean decades, and yet you are prepared to follow local government New Zealand, and I'm not prepared to do that. Follow local government New Zealand and support them using public money, ratepayers' money, to have a strong campaign opposing a cap on rates. I just cannot believe it. I cannot believe it, nor will the community. Their precious money. I can't believe it. And then you will go on. You will go on and accept. And this is, to me, is extraordinary. When you're making a decision, you've got to have all the detail, all the facts. All the detail, all the facts. We haven't got them. We haven't. Not at all. We haven't got all the details and all the facts. We don't know what is core and what is not core in the way of our works. Not detailed enough for us at the moment. And the level, here's the king one of all, the level of the proposed cap. That's extraordinary. So I'm here today moving this in the hope that you won't get ahead of yourselves, because I think you are. You're going right into areas where you needn't go. We're trying to arm you, prepare you for this conference that you're going to, but you've already made your minds up, and I know where this is going, but I've got to shout as loud as I can, top of my voice, that when it comes to spending ratepayers' money, you don't treat it lightly. You don't go into it. Led by the nose, by local government New Zealand, led by the nose, as they did in the Three Waters. I'm drifting off now from the core of my amendment or my motion, and be led by the nose and take away a third of our valuable infrastructure assets. It's crazy, and I am so happy to have moved this, Mayor Nick, and I'd appreciate Councillor's support.
I'm going to ask the Chief Executive, Acting Deputy, to conduct a division on the resolution that's been moved by Councillor Courtney and seconded by Councillor Hodgson.
Councillor Anderson?
No.
Councillor Benge?
No.
Councillor Brand?
Councillor Brand, are you able to hear us?
Yes, sorry, I'm just having trouble trying to get to unmute.
No
But
trouble.
I voted yes for the amendment.
Thank you.
Councillor Courtney?
Yes.
Councillor Hodgson?
It is quite tricky to unmute.
Yeah, it is. You can.
You may well be.
There you go.
So
I'm going to allow the flexibility that a thumbs up is yes.
It's been a bit since this meeting started.
Yeah. Councillors taking Councillor Hodgson as a seconder as for.
Councillor Pakipaki?
I hold it.
Councillor Rainey?
No.
Councillor Sanson?
No.
Councillor Skinner?
Yes.
Councillor Stallard?
No.
Deputy Mayor O'Neill-Stevens?
No.
And Mayor Nick?
Yes.
The motion has been lost, a 7-5 with one apology.
So the resolution is lost. I think the clear resolution, and I'm going to ask whether Councillor Rainey is prepared to move that the council support the two motions in the AGM agenda, or words to that effect.
Absolutely. It's as set out on page 33 of our agenda. Is that correct?
Yes.
Page
Correct.
28 of the report. That the AGM approves the direction of travel set out in this paper, and that the AGM notes members will agree to the next phase at a special general meeting after the 2025 elections in March 2026 or earlier if needed.
So can I ask for a little bit of indulgence? I've got an event at 4:00 and we have spent quite a substantive time on this. My preference would be in that most people have been able to express their view would be for us to be able to move relatively quickly to a vote with members' goodwill. Councillor Rainey has moved in favour of Nelson City Council supporting the two motions at the LGNZ. Is there a seconder for that, please?
Just a quick question.
No, I want to establish whether there's a seconder for the I'm sorry, the Deputy Mayor. That's fine. Thank you. That's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions?
Just quickly on the process, because we had that, what we just voted on was the substantive motion, and we've gone back to the original motion that wasn't moved or seconded prior.
Well, my agenda
did
not preempt. It simply outlined the four issues of which we needed to set a position. Effectively, what is being moved is that the Nelson City Council support a rates capping policy, and that's the resolution I did.
That's a direct, just quick, due respect, that's a direct opposite to the motion we just had is does not support. This is a direct opposite of does support.
No, it's not a direct opposite in the sense that the paper that I had and the resolution from Councillor Courtney covered a wider set of issues than was just in the AGM.
So I officers, all due respect to the chair, but can I just have and put my mind at ease what the officers' view on that is?
And can you just be clear about the standing order? I think the question is the resolution to support the rates capping paper, which I've received from Councillor Rainey and seconded by the Deputy Mayor, is that a direct negative of the resolution we've just considered? And I'm happy to have advice from officers, but it seems to me...
Let them answer rather than debate it, please.
Mayor Nick, I'd be happy to roll B, C and D into the motion if you wanted.
The only thing is I want to separately establish what position the council wishes to take on remits 1, 2 and 4. So if we can, my preference would be to deal with the rates capping issue. And because I suspect there will be a division on that, I don't think there'll be a division on the others, Councillor Rainey. It's just my instinct from the chair.
Move to remove support for all four and then take them apart, because I think that's where we'll get that.
Okay.
Just slightly faster.
Can I take the Deputy Mayor's guidance? And I think this would be a really practical way for us to advance. And in fact, this is what I've done at previous LGNZ meetings. What I'd now like to do is, having had the resolution lost, I would then like to ask on each of the four resolutions, A, B, C, D, through a show of hands, for people to indicate whether they want to support, whether they want to not support or abstain on each of the four issues.
Sorry, this just still need that. I've asked for the officers' advice on standing orders there in regards to this being a direct opposite. I think you're trying to skip through that. You can by all means skip.
Well, I think there's some ruling. Is it a direct opposite? My answer from the chair is no, it's not. But I'm happy to take officers' advice.
Sorry, that was for chair. I've asked officers. I wasn't asking the chair to debate it. My tolerance is getting pushed. Please let the officers say yay or nay, and I can continue rather than the chair trying to debate it before the answer is given. This is an officer's opportunity to give advice, and I'm asking it. Thank you.
Through the chair, I don't think it's. I agree with you. I agree with your stand.
And can I draw the councillor's attention to Standing Order 23.9, and it says this: when a motion is lost, in a situation where a substantive motion that recommends a course of action is lost, a new motion, with the consent of the chairperson, may be proposed to provide direction. And that's exactly the situation we're in. And so I intend to allow a resolution, and the resolution that has been moved by Councillor Rainey, seconded by the Deputy Mayor, of which I would simply like and this is about goodwill and trying to work through business quickly, I genuinely believe an easiest way for us to handle this is to simply go through the 4 issues at the AGM and ask people to give a show of hands as to whether they wish to support, not support, or abstain. Then for me to have officers review that in line with those show of hands, and then put a single resolution. Councillors, I'm happy for me to proceed in that way. Just seems a very fair way in which people can express their issues, and we still would require a majority view. Happy with that course of action? Okay. With respect to the rates capping paper, those that would wish council to support it at the AGM, raise their hand.
That's support from me, Nick.
Thanks, Rachel. 7. Those that do not support is 3. Are any others online wanting to indicate their view? And the third position is to abstain. Is anybody wanting to indicate abstain?
So James is a doesn't support and Trudy looks to be a doesn't support. Is that right, you guys?
I don't want to speak for them.
Can we just check through? So James, Councillor Hodgson's got a thumbs down.
Thumbs down, so he is a no.
And Trudy, sorry. So
Trudy.
Councillor Trudy's got a thumbs
It would be consistent
down.
with their previous position.
Yep. Okay. So
And can I ask that the minutes record the votes on each of these before we take the substantive motion, Mr. Deputy Chief Executive?
we can do that, yes.
Okay, so
Can
at
we
the
have
moment
some clarity? Are we setting some standard where you can send through votes by text? I mean, just to be sure.
That can be seen.
They can be seen. It's just
Oh,
simply a
got it.
matter
You said it
I just can't see them. That's why I'm asking the
they're not on my
the
screen.
administrators to my left here.
Yes.
Yes, no, it can't be by text.
And they
So
are
do our-
on Zoom, it's just.
Do our officers have a clear number on the number of the people?
Yes. So James is not, Councillor Hodgson is not working, so we've asked him to put his camera on and then show us with a thumbs up or a thumbs down, so we can just be very clear.
Emojis an official
So
Probably are, but not
have officers been able to note those that are in support, not support, or abstain on the rates capping paper? It is clear that there is most majority in favour of support. It's just the numbers, and I do wish to have it recorded.
Can I just on a just a purely technical level, what is being recorded? Are we conducting a vote right now?
Yes, my request, because I think it's the easiest way to provide the record, is for the minutes to show who indicated support, who not support, who abstain, and do that on each of these 4 issues, and then we'll have a motion to then determine council's position based on those.
But so straw poll.
No, this is more than a straw poll. This is people voting either support.
Then I've got an issue with it if that's the case, because we don't have anything moved or seconded.
Okay.
We've been
Well, I was going to, for the deputy,
outside the
for the deputy mayor's position, what I was going to do is after we establish the majority positions on each of the 4 issues, was then to take a mover and seconder. But I think if you are concerned with that approach, the easiest thing to do would be to accept the motion from the Councillor Rainey and the deputy mayor. And that is, I'm going to put that to one side. People are not happy with my informal approach. We'll take a very formal approach. Correct. So the rates support cabinet paper in support has been moved by Councillor Rainey. It's been seconded by the deputy mayor, and I'm going to put those resolution. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. No. Are people seeking a division on that? I think we need to have one.
Yes,
So I'd ask the Chief Executive to carry a division on the question of Nelson City Council supporting the rates capping paper.
Can we get the wording of the
resolution? Was just simply that.
So
correct.
It'll just rates capping paper support. Yeah, and the others will come out. Please go.
Councillor Anderson,
Aye.
Councillor Benge,
Aye.
Councillor Brand,
No.
Councillor Courtney,
No.
Councillor Hodgson,
No.
Councillor Pakipaki,
Aye.
Councillor Rainey,
Aye.
Councillor Sanson,
Aye.
Councillor Skinner,
No.
Councillor Stallard,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor O'Neill Stevens,
Aye.
Mayor Nick,
No.
The motion is carried 7-5 with one apology.
Thank you. We now come to the second question, that is with respect to Council's position on Remit 1. This deals with the issue of joint management agreements. The Nelson City Council does not have any joint management agreements. This is quite a complicated issue. My preference is to abstain, but I'm happy to take other resolutions if people would like them to. I will move from the chair then that the Nelson City Council abstain on Remit 1. Happy to be seconded by Councillor Courtney. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no.
No.
I'm going to declare it carried, but I'll be happy to have a division if people wish. There's no call for a division, and so Council will abstain on Remit 1. On Remit 2, which deals with alcohol fees, I'm going to move from the chair that we support Remit 2. Is there a seconder for that? Thanks, Councillor Rainey. Those in favour of the Nelson City Council supporting Remit 2 on the annual adjustment of alcohol licensing fees, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no. That is carried. With respect to Remit 4, I'm going to move from the chair that we support Remit 4, which is from the Tauranga Council, and with respect to local organisation. Councillor Stallard is happy to second.
No, I just have a question when it's appropriate for questions.
Oh, certainly. So we come to Remit 4. Is there somebody that is prepared to second my suggestion? City Council supports it. Thanks to Councillor Paki. Remit 4, review of local government to achieve better balance. Remit 4. Councillor Stella.
Yeah, to me, I find this item quite unclear. It implies there's an imbalance between delivering infrastructure and enabling local decision making. So I wonder if we're going to vote for this, which way is it skewed? Which is the direction we're going?
As the mover, and to be informal, my view the remit is a little bit vaguely worded. And so what it broadly says, in my view, is that there should be a review of the current local government arrangements and that it should be done with LGNZ and government. It is a high-level argument for reform. It is not specific about that reform.
So it clearly says is achieving a better balance. I want to know which direction it's going in, because
the honest answer to that, Councillor Stallard, is I can't read the minds of the movers from Tauranga, and it would be more than happy for you to have either a vote no or a neutral vote on the basis that it's not clear enough. If it was neutral, you'd be leaving it to the judgment of those.
But is it my understanding correct that they want to see a better balance between delivering infrastructure and local decision making? Like that we're weighing them up to advance one over the other.
Again, you're asking me a question about what's in the minds of the Tauranga City Council, and I'm not in a position where I can provide guidance on that. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I would like us to have a shared understanding of what we're voting for, and we might want to provide our own wording to give to the delegates, but I'm certainly not comfortable voting to support this when it's so unclear. I'd rather vote to support giving advice to our delegates.
The only difficulty is we do not have the capacity to move amendments to remits at this late in the picture. And so it's really about providing guidance to our delegates. The reason I'm supporting it and have moved that direction is I do think the local government sector and its structures are in need of review. And I'd prefer that review was done between LGNZ and government, albeit you're quite correct, Councillor Stella, that it is pretty vague.
I mean, I assume LGNZ would be involved in this space even if we didn't pass this remit.
Correct, but what it's doing is it is the Tauranga City Council saying to the LGNZ, and it's actually been supported by the metro sector, is there's a case for reform. I don't really, as the mover, want to take it further than that. So I've had a mover. Did I have a seconder? No. Is there somebody who's prepared to support the support? Paki was happy to support. Sorry, apologies. So our support for remit number 4 has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate? Councillor Stella. Oh, the Deputy Mayor.
I was just going to cheekily say, let us all vote unanimously in favour of advocacy central government on fundamental changes to the local government sector, in alignment with the core purpose of LGNZ, which takes its direction from the members, which we will be given with this remit.
Touche, the Deputy Mayor. Any other contributions? Councillor Stella.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to support something that sets up a competition between delivering infrastructure and local decision making, and suggesting there's currently an imbalance and we're going to achieve a better balance. Surely that's subjective, and I don't believe we'd all be, if we all voted to support it, we'd probably have a different idea in our heads in the direction to which the balance should be readjusted. So it's so vague. I fear what we're voting for, so I won't be supporting it.
The reason, and are there other contributions? That being the case, I'll exercise my right of reply. The reason I support it is I actually think is a very serious nationwide issue for the local government sector that has not faced substantive reform since 1989. I believe when Tauranga talks about needing an efficiency gain around the delivery of services and infrastructure and expressing that balance, is we all face this balance between getting our infrastructure built really efficiently and at the same time trying to do things in a way that's democratic and inclusive. And there is a very real tension around how we do that. Finally, I do take the bait from the Deputy Mayor, and that is I have absolutely no difficulty with Local Government New Zealand doing its normal advocacy function. Where I think it crosses a bridge, as I said on the earlier issue, is when it then starts spending ratepayers' money on a public campaign, not to change the mind of government, which is its role. It's a different thing when it's spending its money to try and spend the public's money on trying to change the public's mind. And that is where I had a difference of view on the earlier issue. On that basis, I will put Remit 4 to the vote. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, say no.
No.
The ayes have it. Did Councillor Stallard wishes no vote recorded? No difficulty. That resolves the issues on today's agenda. Can I thank colleagues at short notice enabling us to do this? I'm sorry?
So, Chair, we have to do number 1.
Oh, I'm sorry, we do too.
Happy to move.
Rightly, the Deputy Chief Executive tries to keep the Mayor on straight and narrow, and that is the resolution that we note that Council's remit on aligning public and school transport services has been selected for consideration at the AGM. I'm going to move that from the Chair. Councillor Courtenay is happy to second. All those in favour, please say aye.
I had a question.
Yes, Councillor Brand.
Sorry, just on the school buses, because that was funded out of central government to the education system, does this, and I raised it when you put this forward for us to consider, and that's fine, but I just don't want us to get locked in that we are then going to have to find the funding to do this on our own if it was to be more permanent. Has that been covered? I didn't actually see it anywhere when I went through the remit information to see that that was actually covered off.
I've been very clear that in the integration of school and public transport services, it must be on the basis that there is no additional cost for the ratepayer. Can I just, for the information of councillors, the Ministry of Education is wanting to give a presentation to both councils, and that is being scheduled at the next Regional Transport Committee, and a reminder to members that the Regional Transport Committee is open to all elected members. It's a really important issue, but I can give you an absolute assurance that the remit, and I'll be making the point in the presentation at the conference on Thursday, Trudy, is that the bill for providing school public transport services must be continue to be provided by the taxpayer and by central government. It's about the delivery of the service, not the funding.
Okay, thank you.
Lovely. I think that brings our agenda to a conclusion, and I'll close with a karakia. Tuia Karonga, Tuia Kiroro, Tuia Te Waho, Tuia Karoto, Tuia Tihi Tangata, Karonga Te Pou, Karonga Te Ao, Humie Huie, Taiaki. And again, in conclusion, can I wish Alec and the team that is working on the state of emergency all the best as they try and continue to work through the issues for our region. Thank you again. Meeting closed.